Welcome to the Immersive Tech in Business podcast, where we explore immersive technologies, understand how they are redefining the way we work, and how you can stay informed and ahead of the competition. We'll explore how immersive technologies are redefining business, speak to industry experts who are building the future, and real people like you using these technologies every day. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Immersive Tech in Business podcast. As always, I'm joined by my partner in crime, Karen Hidden. And
Hello.
Today we're super excited to have Dani Valkova join us. Dani is an audio director with almost a decade of experience in audio strategy, creative direction, brand and artist partnerships, and asset creation for adaptive music and sound design. Cool. Her portfolio extends to over 60 projects in AR, VR, XR, and mobile, desktop, and console games. And her passion lies in the interplay of sounds and science in immersive tech, where she believes purposeful audio can transform a user experience and elevate that experience from good to great. Something that we are very, very passionate about and couldn't agree more. So we're super excited to have Dani. Dani, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Jason. Karen, thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited for this conversation.
Likewise.
Cool. So yeah, it's going to be a fun one, I think. So firstly, I think, how did you get into the space? Like, I'm looking at your background. Clearly, yeah. You are quite experienced in the sound engineering space. You've got a lot of equipment there that looks amazing, and I wouldn't know what to do with if I was in your room. But it sounds like lots of buttons to press, and that's what excites me most, is pressing buttons, especially big red ones. So, yeah. Tell us a bit about how you got into this space and where your journey began.
Yeah, sure thing. So my journey, I would say, starts quite early on, and the reason why I started so early is can see now, sort of with the benefit of hindsight and retrospection, just how those dots kind of came to be and how those were connected to end up sitting in this chair today. But the journey starts very young. I would say that my earliest influences that got me sitting in the chair today actually started at a very young age when I came to Australia, where I grew up with my parents from Bulgaria. I was born in Bulgaria and moved to Oz at a very young age. And at the time, moving to the other side of the world, didn't know the language as an only child, I found myself having such an emotional resonance and connection through music because it transposed the requirement of understanding language, right? So those were the earliest signs where I witnessed and recognized the power that sound and music can have on our emotional state, on our feeling of connection, on our sense of belonging. And at those earliest ages, it was a mix of both music, but also gaming and games, and how they were able to tell stories, even just through the audio itself, the audio design. Even without understanding the ins and outs and the language, I could still get an emotional resonance from the story at a very young age. And then as I got older, I ended up going into law at university after school. And I did law and international business. Felt that those were degrees that were very broad and also gave me the skills by which to think strategically and think both on a macro and a micro level. And I thought that would be something that is a valuable skill regardless of the industry and the place that I wanted to create impact in the world. But at night, I kept going back to those musical roots from my childhood and how much they kept bringing me back in how we can create and show up authentically in the world. So at nighttime, while I was doing law and international business, I then went to audio engineering school. So I did the three concurrently and graduated from all three at the same time. And what that really taught me from a young age is the interplay between the legal framework, the business environment, the business landscape, through the creative execution of audio, and how intertwined they all three of those elements are for us to truly have an impact on a society level through sound and music. And that's where those early kind of seeds were planted. And once I graduated, I then moved into being an electronic musician, creating my own work, and moving through the music industry as an original artist. And from then, that gave me the idea that perhaps there is more to gain and there's more value to be able to add to society than just creating music for myself and performing it in clubs and the rave scene and all of that. But all of that was all kind of leading me into this one pathway, which now I can kind of look back on and see that there were three key drivers, if you will, that kind of got me sitting in this chair. It helped me identify the impact of sound and music on our emotional and mental states, just how much resonance and how much we can communicate through sound. Being in the rave scene and being in clubs and festivals taught me how sound can interact in a 3D environment, in 3D space, and how it moves and how visuals play a part in that role in telling the story. And then finally, how does this all come together? And that is the power to connect and the power that sound has to connect to our audience and connect to each other. And those are the three key elements that are the reason why I'm sitting in this chair speaking with you today.
That's amazing. There's so much there. I mean, I love the interplay. Cara and I often talk about these kind of blended approaches and the T-shaped people and having this kind of breadth of exposure. And I love that you started out almost with, kind of something that no sane person would do, which is take on three completely different degrees at once. But how you kind of almost took a systems approach and understood the intersection of all of them and how that's kind of played out. It's really fascinating. I mean, the interesting question for me is in this kind of experience of having that background, coming into kind of building games, building applications, and understanding the impact that sound and audio and music kind of make in three-dimensional spaces. Just when you say it kind of elevates like the experience and kind of talking about it from layman's perspectives, give us an example of where you've taken something from a relatively kind of standard stage, almost generic experience to something that's kind of elevated the experience, and more importantly, what you've observed about the people going through that experience and how it's affected them.
Yeah, for sure. We had a project recently where we worked in a museum space, an exhibition, and we worked with our client in that, in the sense that we wanted to introduce the element of sound and music in a 3D space, physical 3D space, and that was at a museum exhibition. And it was the first time that we proposed adding sound, adding speakers to a museum space. And that presented a whole lot of additional challenges, making sure that we were cognizant of the directions of the speakers, being respectful of other exhibitions that were nearby. How can we make sure that we are hitting high fidelity in a very localized space without it affecting the experience on the circumference of the exhibition? And I love that we started that conversation with the museum curators at a very early stage, and we wanted to understand what their goals and their drivers were for that exhibition. What is the story that they wanted to tell through that exhibition specifically? What were the emotions that they wanted to convey? And there was an entire sort of 13, 14, 15-minute walk around this exhibition as it told a story of an ancient civilization. And what we were able to do with sound is isolate different chapters of the story on different speakers. And each chapter of the story had its own ups and downs. It had a different point of tension. Some were resolving, some were building tension. And without using any words and only images and only sculptures and images and anything else that was present in the exhibition and nothing else, we were able to help shape the story of this ancient civilization in a museum space and in a 3D space, purely by being very deliberate of how we used sound, what emotions that sound conveyed, when we lifted tension and when we resolved it, and just as critically, when we had silence, because it is just as important to be recognizing when sound plays a role and when it has value and when it's time to not use it.
Sounds fascinating. Out of curiosity, which ancient civilization was it?
It was the Anyang civilization.
Okay, the Anyan civilization. I'm going to say that they had lots of layers to them, but that.
Oh no, you didn't. No,
Oh,
you
yes,
did
I
not
did.
go there.
Sorry.
You need to peel it back, man.
Yeah. So I guess like I mean that sounds amazing and kind of jealous that I don't get to experience that. In so in a physical space, I guess there's lots of challenges to kind of that spatial audio, that three-dimensional audio, that sensory audio. How do you translate that into your XR, AR, VR experiences?
That's a very good question, and that ties into a lot of questions to be asking really early on in the project. So straight off the bat, it's critical to understand why a certain platform has been chosen for a particular activation or experience. What are the strengths of that platform? What are the weaknesses? On an audio level, what are the capabilities technologically outside of the creative execution of it? What are the technological capabilities of that particular platform? What problems is that platform looking to solve? And what solution is this particular activation or experience adding to trying to resolve that problem? Out of that, we start to spill out the goals for sound. Where is it most imperative that we use it? This is before we even started the creative questions down. Where is it most imperative that we use it? Where is it imperative that we hold back? And then from that, we have a spill out of our potential audio scope of work. It is at that point then that we start looking at the strategic execution, the creative execution of the sound and music. Is it just music? Is there a need for SFX or sound design on top? Is there some sort of linear video that will require sound design that is time synced to images? Or are we just using abstract soundscapes and music to convey emotion? Is emotion something that is important in this? Or are we using sound as a more background space for different reasons and different drivers? Are we looking to use sound as a driver for the behavior of our audience or our user? Are we signposting success and failure through sound? Is there an importance or repetition of certain keys or notes? Or is there sonic branding that's important here that we need to be conscious of? So to answer that question, it's like a split, a fork in the road. One of it is the creative execution and the other is the technological requirements of the platform. And then once you spill out all the questions, they converge back afterwards. And that's how we develop our audio strategy at the end.
Okay. Just thinking in terms of you talked about the kind of changing behaviors, and we often look at how great storytelling can change a behavior, how gamification or kind of behavioral psychology can change behaviors, how nudges can change behaviors. I hadn't really thought. I mean, I understand how audio and sound can drive emotion. Like a really good kind of soundtrack to something, or the right timed audio to something can elevate that emotional engagement. And I guess that's really the hook here. Is at the heart of behavior change lies this kind of emotional engagement with the content, and how. And I wouldn't say susceptible you are to that change, but essentially how invested you will be in that change. And I can kind of see how audio can play a very key role in kind of elevating that emotional connection and emotional relationship to what you're seeing and experiencing. Is that kind of correct?
Sure. Well, just pop your phone next door in the next room with your speaker on and then watch your behavior change when you hear a notification
Oh my
sound.
gosh. That's, and I wanted to ask a question, just when you were talking about the sort of signposting, the successes and the failures, what do you mean about that?
Well, I mean, sound is very good at conveying positive and negative emotions. So say we have a certain experience which has a gamification aspect to it, and gamification is fantastic. It's one of the earliest ways that we enter new tech because it gives us a sense of play and exploration, which is great, and it helps people feel more aligned and more engaged and more willing to give things a try because there is this gamification aspect to it. It also really helps with education and incorporating gamification in an education sphere as well, and even wellness. And we're seeing gamification in terms of the wellness sector and health and wellness, which is great. Gamification at its core is a sense of solving a problem or getting from A to B. Sometimes there is no failure state and we just repeat and repeat and repeat until we get to state B. And sometimes we make progress, then we go back a little bit, maybe we lose a life or whatever it is in the game, or we get hit, whatever the gamification mechanic is. We can signpost that with sound. So say that we have a progression that goes over 5 chapters, and every chapter we can signpost that we're getting closer to the end. This is just an example from the top of my head. We start off with a particular 5-key interval going up in scale, whatever it may be. Every time you reach the next chapter, we unlock the next key in the sequence. So because we've already introduced the user or the player to that 5-key sequence at the beginning, their mind and their brain has already locked into what the success state already sounds like. So as we're making progress and as they're unlocking more of that sequence, the brain is already connecting to the sense that there's some sort of progress to something that they had previously heard and is sitting in the back of their mind. And they're being steered forward in order to unlock the full melody.
Okay, that makes sense.
So the obviously the kind of I don't know if it's technically the right term, but maybe the elephant in the room is when we talk about immersive tech in business, which is surprisingly what this podcast is called. The audio and sound is not the first thing you think about when you think of business applications, and I guess in my sense it's a kind of double-faceted question. Like, why do you think that is, and why do you think that's maybe not the right style of thinking?
Yeah, for sure. It has historically always been the last cab off the rank. In production cycles, we work through everything else, the visuals, the UX flows, the everything visual-wise, and then we get to the audio right at the end. Why? I think it really depends. I think it's often a last thought in a lot of projects, or it's seen as something that, well, if we cut one thing, it'll be the sound. And there are some sound arguments on why that could be. If it is a mobile app, one of the arguments that's presented is a lot of people have the sound off on their mobile device anyway. So if we're going to cut something out, or if we're going to add it in case we have time at the end, it's going to be. And there are, and I think it's important to be cognizant and be aware of what those arguments are and what the drivers are that have led audio to be a last thought. Because it helps to identify what is the problem and how can I have a think about what is a possible solution to this, or why this problem has emerged to begin with. The reason why I think it's a huge loss of an opportunity is just because how impactful audio can be, how impactful. And for me, one of my core missions professionally is to start the conversation about sound and music at a much earlier point. On a project level, that's right at the start, right at the brief, right when we receive or developing a concept, and understanding what are the drivers for success for that project, and starting to incorporate audio at that level, so that as we're developing the visuals, as we're developing the mechanics, as we move through the inevitable backwards and forwards in a production cycle, audio can help elevate where we need to add strength. And then we can push back where something has been deprioritized. But leaving it to the end makes audio nothing more than a reactive addition to a project. And that is a huge loss of impact to the final result.
Yeah. I think the mobile observation is actually a very interesting one because, and the first thing that popped into my head was going to a public toilet once and someone next to me was playing Candy Crush, and out of the thing you just heard tasty, which is not something you really want to hear when you're sitting in a bathroom stall. So yeah, I think there's a time and place for mobile audio. But I mean, the interesting thing is maybe, immersive tech is the defining change of that, because I think that nothing annoys me as much as people who don't wear earphones and who kind of feel that it's appropriate for everybody to hear what they're doing on their mobile phone, especially when it's really obnoxious. But that's not the case in a lot of kind of headset driven immersive experiences. Their audio is very much front and center in those kind of experiences, and I guess one of the things that's just thinking out loud here is we've obviously as an industry got to be careful about bringing the baggage along, saying, okay, well, audio is kind of the afterthought of this, because I think that in immersive experiences, I guess the clue is in the word immersive. Audio as well as visual is part of the solution. I mean, the two don't exist mutually exclusively. The one is very much intertwined with the
reliant on the other.
Yeah, I guess the challenge is is let's like play a hypothetical here. I mean, if you were sitting in front of and I guess that the audience would probably, this plays very specifically to the questions I'm guessing the audience would ask, is you're sitting in front of a business executive who's, let's take a hypothetical application, like there's a training experience that they need to, it's an international business law firm who is essentially looking to train up their staff in IP law and wants to do it immersively. I guess the first question that the person sitting on the other side of the table with their business attire would be asking is, where does sound play a role in any of this thing? I mean, I need to give this guy basically something that they need to learn. I'm going to put it in a VR headset because it's a more kind of immersive way to learn. Why should I worry about sound? I mean, how would you be convincing that person, or how would you be giving them examples to say, actually, no, stop, take a step back. You haven't considered X, Y, Z. And if you introduce sound here, here, and here, you can actually elevate, this part of the brain or this type of behavior, and how would you kind of navigate that?
Well, first and foremost, what is the experience in the headset?
Okay, well, let's say hypothetically, it's basically teaching people how to have tough conversations with people who don't understand the importance and significance of protecting their IP, and how to have that tough conversation and convince people that they should be, having those tough conversations with clients.
So once the user is in the headset, there is a virtual person. Like, what is the experience? What is the user flow inside?
It's an avatar that you're sitting across from, and you've got to try and convince that kind of avatar customer who's got some kind of protectable IP, but maybe feels that it's not worth taking that IP. Or actually, I mean, I'm wondering if maybe we're going down a bit of a rabbit hole now. I'm guessing, you can think of any hypothetical situation. I'm just more, the question for me is how we take the viewer who is a business person who probably has has a like, you know, experience of traditional business applications, and how you would convince them that sound has as an important place to play in immersive technology, and to kind of maybe put the firmly held beliefs about traditional kind of Sapper based software and all of the stuff that they've come from, and how you introduce them into this immersive world where sound suddenly is a big component of the solution, and get them to appreciate and understand its value.
Mm-hmm. My questions were because we can't start offering solutions before we answer why.
Exactly.
That's where my questions are coming at. So for us to start offering advice or consulting on the best solution, we cannot begin that conversation without understanding what are the drivers, why is this experience structured like this, where is the attention of the user at any particular moment. Is there a million things on the UI that is diverting their attention when really the core of the attention should be on the facial expressions, to use as an example, the facial expressions of the avatar? And would audio mean that we don't have to have a whole bunch of different UI elements sitting on the screen, and that would give the user more presence and more attention on the face of the avatar, which is the driver of success here? So these questions that we should be asking our clients are, what is the aim? What are we trying to help the user do? What behavior do we want from the user? And then rather than just adding more bits and pieces on top like audio, adding more elements, what can audio do that means we don't have to have all of these other elements as well, which are diverting attention away from the core objective for our user to begin with?
Yeah, so that's a great statement, because I think a lot of people, like I often have conversations with UX people, you know, explaining what the differences are when you move from a traditional app-based user experience methodology into a virtual reality methodology, where suddenly, you know, you can't rely on navigation dialogues or pop-ups or things like that, because, you know, in the movie industry, they call it breaking the fourth wall, where the kind of actor will look directly at you in the audience. I feel like I don't know what it's quite called in VR, but I feel like every time you break the immersiveness, it's like kind of breaking the fourth wall, is suddenly people remember, oh, I'm actually in an application. And the real kind of victory condition or success metric you're trying to achieve is that someone actually forgets that they are in an application and starts to think that they're in the real world. So I love the idea about using sound to replace probably what the UX community might like kind of build as crutches to essentially help the end user kind of navigate the experience. I mean, out of curiosity, have you got like maybe one or two examples you can share of where you've used audio to replace some kind of user interface function?
For sure. So an example, we just had an incredible project go live this week, as a matter of fact. And what we did then, and it was a first, and I'm so excited about this project, is we teamed up with Google and to use their new AR Core and Geospatial API, along with Taito and their IP with Space Invaders. And the application was developed by an incredible team at Unit 9. And together, these wonderful collaborators, we all came together to create the next installment in the Space Invaders story, which is now in its 45-year history. It is the 45-year anniversary of Space Invaders. It's one of my earliest memories as a child playing, which is really, really exciting. And what we set out to achieve there is to create a fully immersive gameplay that showcases just how powerful AR Core and the new Geospatial API are. And we wanted to immerse the player in the real world and create Space Invader levels out of the data coming through the Geospatial API, which means that the Space Invaders were reacting to the player's immediate surroundings. And those levels were even customized based on the player's location, what time of day they were playing, and even the weather conditions were having an effect on how the levels were generated, how the user was interacting with them. So essentially, we were putting the user in the driver's seat to create these levels and these experiences. And it was such a clever way and such an exciting way to create an immersive environment. The way that we used audio there is there's a lot happening on the screen, right? You're shooting, there's power-ups, there's an incredible array of different weapon upgrades. And because it's based on your phone, we were very conscious not to overlay the UI with too many visuals. We wanted the focus to be on the user being on their street, looking around at the architectural landmarks around them, seeing how the space invaders were reacting and responding. And there were there are incredible portals that spawn on the side of buildings and in the sky. And we wanted that to be front and center. We wanted to showcase that. So we used SFX there in a way that alerted when a new power-up had been gained, when a certain ammo had, they had run out of an ammo, when we used spatialized audios to alert the user that there was a portal that had spawned behind them so that they would turn around and see that something's happened. And we used both audio cues, but also 3D spatialization in a way that helped the user orientate themselves and alerted them to events that were happening in their 3D environment without us having to overload the visuals. And that was a key driver of success for us because it allowed us to really showcase the incredible capabilities of the geospatial API.
Sure. And I mean, it's interesting. It's something that we're trying to do ourselves at the moment is be able to use spatial audio to track people to, like you said, the portal opening up behind the person is being able to attract people's attention to, because now you're in a 360 world. So in our example, there's like constellations above you and certain things are happening in the sky above you. But a lot of people, when they come into VR the first time, they aren't used to looking around. So they'll look in front of them. And I've found that we haven't quite nailed it, to be entirely honest. I mean, we haven't made a sound saying actually up over here to your right in the sky is kind of, there's a sound emanating from there. So I mean, when people are building experiences with spatial audio, how much of it is the actual sound engineering and the way that you build the sound versus the technology that plays the sound kind of creating a role? Because I found we've used the spatial capabilities, but it's still, and maybe it's because we're building for Quest, and Quest is not really a kind of a spatial audio experience that it's not working. But I'm just curious, for other people who are building immersive apps who want to use audio to attract people's attention to different things happening in different positions, how you do that.
Yeah, for sure. So there are three main things to consider here. One is the way that the technology is being used, the technological capabilities, how it's been implemented, all of the dev side of things. One is the actual sound itself, and that's the creative execution. And the third one is the timing. So to go into a little bit of detail on each one of those, we need to focus on platforms that do allow for 3D spatialization. And we're making incredible headway in that. There's great progress, and we are seeing more and more APIs come to the market that give us the power to have 3D spatialized sound. So we need to ensure that we have the technological platform that supports it to begin with. So that's the first one. The next one is the creative considerations. With this, the sound needs to be crafted and sound designed in a way that it does break through. It does break through the noise. It needs to be, just on top of my head, certain frequencies break through noise better than others. That's the reason why emergency vehicles all tend to be have a peak at around 1,000 hertz. Like, all of these things need to be given consideration. Also, if the sound design itself is too similar to other sounds that are also in the sonic space, it is not demanding your attention. It's just part of the background noise. It's the same principle when you're going through a really busy area and you're bombarded with advertising. It's much harder to recall one specific advertisement than if you're going through, I don't know, on a country road and there's a single billboard that's isolated for the only billboard in 100 kilometers, you know. So it's all about that. And then that ties into the last one, which is all about the timing. If you are overloaded with other sounds, then that sound will just not be heard. So we need to be conscious of when these alerts are happening. And if it is a driver for success on this particular application, that alert does demand attention up immediately, then there needs to be some consideration paid on a strategic level on what else is happening in the sonic spectrum on our sonic platform at the same time. Are there too many sounds close by? Is there other things demanding the user's attention at the same time? Should we be taking some of that sound out so that the attention goes up? Like it's all about, it's like a conversation. You want to have a conversation with your audience so that everything has room to breathe and people have a call and response in both their attention
Maybe also
and their behavior.
How does that sound fit into the overall story and those objectives that you want to get out of the entire experience?
Yeah, for sure. But there's also some creative leeway here. If you have a certain sonic identity and it's really, really important to the project that there's one particular alert and that alert makes you stop dead in your tracks and can completely 180 your behavior, then there is an argument to be made here on a creative standpoint. That particular sound could actually be incredibly left of center, because it's going to demand your attention because you're expecting something else and you're breaking people's expectations.
So again, that reminds me of another kind of I'm borrowing a lot from the UX industry here, but you know, there's certain patterns and practices of behavior. So you know, the thing is, when you're developing systems that people use, you don't need to necessarily reinvent the wheel every time. You know, there's certain tried and tested ways of doing things. You know, like how many more creative ways do you need to design a login screen? You know, so it's, you know, and the way buttons work and the way scrolling lists and things work. And I guess in music and in sound and audio, there's probably a similar type of, you know, common industry patterns and practices, certain sounds that we associate with certain things, and being able to bring those in to kind of create those alerts. As you said, like to do that like 180 flip is being able to bring something that people are used to and not necessarily trying to to reinvent the wheel from an audio perspective is kind of what I'm getting at here.
Yeah, for sure. I think that also touching there on Jason is the fact that audio and sound exists in us as a society on a collective psyche. We have as a society, we have a collective psyche on recognizing that certain sounds are associated with certain events, certain behaviors. And I think that's absolutely speaks to the power of sound, that we're able to communicate. It's like symbols. We're able to communicate an entire idea so quickly in a symbol. And sound is very, very similar to that. And it speaks to its power and its potential to create impact incredibly fast, that it does exist within the collective on a psyche level.
Cool. I've got so many questions here. I mean, I think the big one that's kind of I guess sitting in my head is you know, if you're sitting at the start of a project and you don't have access to a Dani to kind of help you, and you know that's you know, sound is important, it is critical. You know, what are some of the tips and tricks that lay people can maybe use to get, you know, maybe 60-70% of the way before they realize they know nothing about sound engineering and they need to bring a Dani in?
Yeah, we need to track down Dani, and we need to stop using polystyrene to make like an iceberg effect.
Yeah. That's right there. The first step.
My name is Dani. I'll be your sound engineer for the rest of this.
For sure, for sure. The first question is, just because you can do something like adding sound
right?
doesn't necessarily mean you do or you should. Right. So the potential for us to add sound is not in itself an argument to add sound. So the first question is why do you want to add it? Why are you investing time and energy to make sure that sound is present, it's executed, it's working effectively, it's sitting right? Like, there's a lot that comes with effective sound design. And why are you entering that particular ring? What are you looking to achieve? And for me, that would be the absolute first question.
So assuming that you can articulate the reason why you're bringing sound in, maybe you're creating an immersive experience. It's kind of a field trip, a virtual field trip to a museum, and the obvious stuff is that you want the narrator's voice. So that's obvious, because you want to be able to give someone an auditory experience. But I would say that if you stop there, and to use that as a hypothetical case study, you could create quite I wouldn't say boring, but probably not a very engaging solution, because I've seen a few examples in the past where you use a lot of voice and a lot of voice interaction, and then the person in the experience is a passive observer in that journey, and your brain switches off after the first 5 minutes, and then you suddenly kind of like come back in 2 minutes later and realized you've stopped listening to what the person is saying. And there's obviously a big visual component to that, but I'm guessing that there's also a big audio component to that, and how you essentially kind of just apply your mind to being able to kind of bring that level of audio into the experience. And again, as maybe a small studio or a business who's looking to kind of build something, are we just talking simple special effects like audio effects that we bring in? Are we talking kind of background music? Does that make a big difference in kind of making experiences more engaging? Or and maybe also a question is, you said sometimes the answer is not to bring audio in.
Yeah, silence.
Yeah. Do you find that, how much of that is just, kind of that spidey sense, like going through the process yourself and saying something feels like it's missing here, I need to bring some audio in, and how much of that is actually, this is a learned,
strategic in a way.
Yeah, as you say, like how much of it is, like how much can we rely on our gut feel to say actually there's something missing here, versus how much do we not know that we don't know about the audio industry, and actually need to say, this is where this is where an expert needs to come in. I'm guessing, because I'm just thinking there's a lot of game studios, there's a lot of like companies doing learning content in virtual reality and augmented reality. Many of them are probably not thinking about sound. Businesses are using this technology all the time, and I'm just trying to kind of guess is if those people had to bring sound in, is there enough of inherent knowledge about sound, because we live in a world full of sound, where we can kind of bridge the gap to a certain part, versus how much of that is actually, we actually know less about audio and sound than we think we do, and there's a whole body of knowledge here that would make a world of difference, and ergo we have to hire more Danis in our projects.
I'll liken it to this analogy. So if you have a gym membership, you can go to the gym, and we all know how to lift things up. We pick up, bags from the supermarket, whatever it is. You can go to the gym and lift things up. That action on its own does not guarantee that you're going to build muscle. It does not guarantee that you will reach your goal. You need correct technique. You need to do the right reps. You need to do them the right weight. There's so much strategy that is not just related to the execution of an event, but how you execute it. And that is the strategy of audio. We all know what good audio sounds like because we felt it. We know what good music sounds like. but not having the awareness of technique, all of those bits and pieces that in the gym analogy does not in its own right mean that you're going to build muscle.
Some of us might just be on the treadmill and we should be at the weights.
Yes.
So that's the biggest problem.
It's yeah.
Karen, that's actually very true. And that's about misdirection. You're misdirecting your attention in the wrong place. For example, if you're looking to have bigger arms, but you're running on the treadmill, then there's a misalignment from strategy to execution.
That's a great analogy.
The
So I'm just going to ask a little bit more of a future kind of question now. Is what we all know about audio is obviously the role music has to play, the role that sound effects have to play, the role, like the emerging role that spatial audio is playing. Where are you seeing the industry going? I mean, especially now that I guess a lot of people are looking at AI, kind of looking at replacing voice actors with AI. We're looking at in the 3D and animation world, there's a lot of AI like essentially replacing the need for animation and 3D modeling. And I'm curious to just get a sense in the industry, like in the kind of audio industry, sound industry, what are some of the emerging kind of disruptions and technologies that you're seeing are going to shape the industry in the future?
I mean, AI is the buzzword of the year, right? It's on all of our minds. We're seeing so much progress there in very short period of time. In terms of audio, I find it really fascinating just how many ways we could, for example, looking at AI, can turn to AI to help our processes. Generative AI, so us creating an audio track, a musical track from a learnt data set, is only one of the ways that the audio industry can be impacted. It is certainly not the only way. We're seeing a rise and an emergence of AI tools that help us in sorting out our music collection in order to categorize it and add metadata depending on mood, energy, genre. And that has sped up the way that we can communicate to clients in order to establish a mood board, a sound board, to start ideas flowing on what could potentially work for a project. Cyanite AI, an incredible tool that's coming out as well in that realm. So AI use in music is spanning so many different use cases. Where I'm really fascinated is how we're now starting to combine these to readapt and create new systems and new processes. So rather than relying on one particular trend or tool, how are we piecing everything together and making using the strengths from everything to make a new system or a process? In that way, I'm really fascinated with the way that different AI tools that target a different problem and offer a different solution, be it asset generation or sorting or identification of certain moods or whatever it is, how that starts to tie in with the emergence of spatialized sound and how we're using a 3D sound environment and how AI could potentially take data and take certain data points from that and then generate a completely different sonic experience depending on the way the user is interacting with that space. Now, the use cases that I see that potentially having a role in the future and my vision for us being able to use that and for all of that coming together are in two different areas. One is education, and that's education not only at a school level, but education in upskilling as adults as well. Especially in areas where perhaps using a non-MR mixed reality situation could introduce a lot of costs or dangers or things like that, and we're able to offer education at scale in resources that otherwise wouldn't be available. And then the other one is wellness and mental health and how we can start to work with generated environments to help us deal with stress, sleep problems, mindfulness, and meditation. And there's an incredible ability there that I foresee for us to combine spatialized sound with visuals, with these AI models, and how all of this content could be generative in a way that responds to our mental states in that moment. So depending on the mental state that we come into a particular experience, we're having a different interaction with that environment. And I think that is an incredibly exciting opportunity to not only use audio to make an impact for us in the way that we connect, but make an impact for us at a society level.
So I'm guessing in that kind of analogy, which is quite fascinating, is you were seeing the music almost driving behavior, whereas in my mind, I almost took one leap forward and said, imagine it could be responsive to our moods and behavior. But then that's a whole new side of technology, I guess. Yeah,
for sure. What I find fascinating and what's driving a lot of the questions that I'm asking myself, and the questions are always more important than the answers, right? The best question that we can ask ourselves is like, why are we doing this? Why is this behavior happening? What can I do? What's driving this particular situation? And what I love is psychology or neuroscience, music, and emerging technology, immersive tech, all actually have the same why, and they're all going towards the same goal, and that's how can I shape my reality? How can I shape my own reality? And to me, that is an incredibly, incredibly exciting question that they all have in common, and we can all strengthen that mission together by using the best
having
of
that
all
positive
of those.
behavior change. I think it's super exciting.
It does raise all sorts of philosophical questions, because one might suggest, shaping your own reality means that, in a sense, you are kind of stepping out of reality by kind of shaping your own reality, and whether or not as a society it's going to kind of take us or make us drift further apart from each other, because we're in a world where we're so insulated in our own universe that we've created, where generally from a societal kind of I suppose experience is the world is shaped around us by the fact that we live in a society of other people and beings and things that all kind of make changes. So I mean, it's a very interesting philosophical debate as to how that's going to change us as a species when we are starting to build these own worlds and live in them. It feels a little bit like WALL-E, in the spaceship, where all the people like living in their own worlds and floating around. So it's fascinating.
Sure. There's a saying that comes to mind here. The same fire that keeps a man warm is the same fire that can burn him alive. The tool is the power. It is up to us how we choose to use it. So yes, it does have the potential to alienate. That's undeniable. You can see the sense of dissociation that we have reported by the use of social media, how connected we are to our phones. But with that power also comes the power to connect. And that's opened up more questions and more opportunities for us to answer the question of how do we connect to each other in this new reality, new definition of reality. How can we use these tools to connect?
Which is why are we using this? Why are we doing it?
Yeah, so there you have it, everybody. In a world where we are striving for connection, we might just have discovered the solution to all of our problems, and therein lies sound engineering and audio alongside immersive technologies. Fascinating conversation, and probably could have asked another 1,200 questions, but just wanted to say it's been fascinating. I mean, I've as always, coming out of each of these sessions, it's always the best when you yourself as the podcast host learn a whole bunch of new stuff. And I can definitely say there's a lot of, not only a lot of learnings, but a lot of introspective questions that I think we need to be asking
so many
ourselves.
Projects. Dani, I don't know if you've made our lives easier or just complicated them further, but it's been really, really, really helpful.
Oh, thank you, Karen, Jason. This has been such an interesting conversation. Thank you both so much for your time. And I'm so excited that we've been able to generate so many interesting questions out of our conversation.
Thank you, Dani. And I'm sure that we might actually even want to do a follow on to this, because I think that there's so many things that we've talked about in this session.
A lot more that we need to get into.
Yeah, thank you. More. Yeah, really, thank you very much for giving us the time and sharing your wisdom, and some of the projects you've been working on sound absolutely fascinating. So definitely be looking out to see if there's any videos and things to get a sense of what those look like. But thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Dani.
Wonderful. Bye. Thank you for your time. Speak soon. Bye.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Immersive Tech in Business. If you found our podcast helpful, please subscribe. Subscribing not only keeps you up to date on new episodes, but it allows us to keep bringing you really great content. Seeing as you stuck around for the end credits, and this isn't even a Marvel movie, we have some free goodies to say thank you. See the links below to grab your free copy of our Practice Makes Perfect report and a free infographic about the power of VR for learning. You can also check out our Reality Bites blog for even more useful information on immersive tech. And that's a wrap. See you next time.